So in today's lesson, we're going to be talking about the most important minor chord progression that you need to understand and be able to solo over. And once you do understand this chord progression, how to solo over it, you are going to become a much, much better guitarist and soloist, guaranteed. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Listed on the chord diagrams above, you will see the chord progression that we are going to be learning today. We're going to learn how to play the chords for it, and we will also learn how to solo over this chord progression. So it is actually very simple. It's only 3 chords, but you're going to see there's some interesting little caveats that we have to take into account that we don't usually have when it comes to major chord progressions. So the first chord is going to be D half diminished, and this is a way that you can write D half diminished as well, with that little circle with a slash through it. Then it's going to be G7. So if you see there in the chord diagram, it says G7 flat 13. That flat 13 is optional, and we're going to get into a little bit of that, but just keep in mind it's G7, okay? And then finally, we're going to end on a C minor 7. And this is going to be in a minor key, a 2, 5, 1 progression. So those of you might have heard of a 2, 5, 1 progression in a major key, but maybe not a 2, 5, 1 progression in a minor key. So how does this differ, and what makes this actually a little bit more complicated than a simple chord progression in a major key? That's what we're going to be discussing today. So those of you who understand how to construct a minor key, we will write out the notes first that are in a C minor scale, C natural minor scale. So those of you might have heard, just a quick refresher, if you take any major scale and you start it from the 6th note, you will get the relative minor of that major scale, which is essentially the minor version of those same notes. However, it still doesn't actually provide us with everything we need to be able to play over this chord progression. By the way, before I even continue, let's go ahead and just play it so you can hear what it sounds like. And actually, here I'll just play a little sample from the track that I've made for this lesson. So that's what the chord progression sounds like. We should probably understand what it sounds like and not just talk about the notes and all this kind of theory nonsense. Theory, it's all nonsense. Anyway, so let's go ahead and write out the notes for a C minor scale. So we have C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and then C. So actually, if I switch over here, you're going to see these are the notes in a C minor scale on the guitar neck. Okay, that's just one place to play them. Okay, so let's go back here for a second. We'll get there. So if we actually build chords on this scale here, this what we call the C natural minor scale, you'll notice that we actually do not get this G7 chord here. So that's gonna be the little tricky part that we need to figure out in order to be able to play over this chord progression, okay? Because we wanna be able to not just randomly run scales over chord progressions, but one common theme that you'll see in my videos, if you watch any of the other ones I've done, is that we want to understand the actual chords that we're playing over so that we can target the best notes on those chords. So if we built 7th chords, those would be all the chords that we would get, okay? So we get C minor 7, D half diminished, E flat major 7, F minor 7, G minor 7, A flat major 7, and B flat 7. So one problem that you see there is that, well, there's no G7 chord like is in this chord progression. So that means that there's kind of something missing from these chords that isn't going to fully allow us to master soloing over this chord progression. Now, some of you might have learned in the past that the 5 chord, its purpose is to create tension that resolves to the 1 chord. And this is something you usually hear with a major chord progression. So for example, if I played this G7 might resolve to a C major chord. It would be the 5 chord actually in the key of C major. But now what we're doing here in this chord progression is we're actually using a dominant chord to create tension that resolves to a minor chord, which sounds really cool. Because again, the whole entire purpose of dominant chords most of the time, except for in a blues when it's the 1 chord and the 4 chord, is to create tension that takes us somewhere, okay? So how the heck did we get this freaking G7 chord here? Because if you notice, there's a G minor 7 chord if we figure out all the chords in the key of C minor. So how is G7... How do we square that circle? How does G7 just appear out of thin air? Well, first of all, actually, it kind of does just appear out of thin air through something called the harmonic minor scale. So everything we just talked about here was actually based on the C natural minor scale. But those of you may be familiar with minor scales and watch my other video on the harmonic minor scale, we actually artificially raise the 7th note of the scale up a half step. So actually, if we took this B flat here and we just raised it up a half step, now all of a sudden, we actually get the note required to turn this G minor 7 chord that's right here into a G7 chord, which is right here in this chord progression that we're talking about. So you see that we actually have, if we built a chord off of G, we'd have G, B natural now, D, and an F. That would be our G7 chord. So now instead of G minor 7, something like this, we would have this, a raised B up to B, a raised B flat up to B, my apologies. Now we have a G7 chord, okay? So essentially, that 5 chord in this 2-5-1 progression, all you need to know is that it actually comes from the harmonic minor scale. Okay, the harmonic minor scale. So now, with that being said, that's actually going to be the key thing that we have to do when we solo over this chord progression is we want to actually turn this B flat here into B, but only when we play over that G7 chord. So now, let's go ahead and switch the diagram here so that you have the C natural minor scale. So here would be the C natural minor scale. This is all the stuff that we had written down there before. So we have C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and C. Okay? So now in the harmonic minor scale, what we're going to do is we're going to raise this B flat up to B. And now all of a sudden, there's our harmonic minor scale. So it's actually quite easy. All we have to do is just change one note. So let's see what that sounds like. So C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B, C. You notice that B, it sounds really interesting. It's begging to resolve up a half step to C. And that's exactly what the function of this G7 chord in the chord progression is. You hear this, da. It's dying to resolve to that C minor chord. So that B natural creates the tension that the 5 chord is supposed to create, and it resolves us to the 1 chord. So that's the thing about minor chord progressions, and that's why this particular chord progression is so important, because you have to understand that a lot of times in minor keys, you can't just play one quote-unquote scale over the whole entire thing. A lot of times you're going to get that 5 chord that's resolving to a minor chord, and you have to understand where that 5 chord comes from, and then you have to understand to target actually that B natural note on that 5 chord, okay? So essentially, it's gonna be super duper simple. So we're gonna start soloing over it now. All I'm gonna do is over this D half diminished chord, I'm gonna play natural minor. So let's write that down, natural minor. Then over the G7 chord, I'm gonna play harmonic minor. And then over the C minor chord, I'm gonna go back to playing natural minor. So let's try it out now. We're gonna go ahead and actually play over this backing track a little bit. And first, I'm just gonna play really, really simple stuff so that you can hear exactly what's going on. So here's D half diminished. Now there's the G7, and there's the C minor 7. So we got C minor for 2 bars. Let's try it again. So I'm making sure I'm playing that B natural over the G7 chord. So let's try again. So here's D half diminished. And then there's G7. So all I'm doing is I'm playing my C natural minor scale the whole entire time, but I'm gonna target that B natural note, and I'm gonna have this moving up, the B flat moving up to B natural on the G7 chord. So now I'll go ahead and play a little bit more stuff and see if you can hear when I hit that B natural note, okay? By the way, here's an extra little tip, is that if you want to, you still can play that B flat note over the G7 chord. It's not like a wrong note or anything. It's not gonna sound bad. It's actually gonna sound pretty good. But if I hear somebody who never ever plays the B natural over that chord, then that kind of tells me that they don't really understand how to play over that chord progression, and they're probably just running natural minor scale, or maybe they're even running minor pentatonic scale. By the way, you could play minor pentatonic scale over the Z minor chord as well. Those of you who don't remember, minor pentatonic scale would actually be our natural minor scale minus the A flat and the D. So that's actually a little mini pentatonic scale pattern right there. But let's go ahead and put all the notes back so that you can understand. So we're gonna be moving this B flat up to B on the G7 chord, and now I'm gonna allow myself to play a little bit more variation of different things. There's that B natural. Oh, I played it there on the C minor chord, but I didn't sit on it. As you can see there, it sounds really cool, and it sounds like, oh, I'm not just running the same scale over and over, because I'm not. But at the same time, it's not like I'm changing everything, right? I'm just moving literally one note. We can go and add some more notes to this. So I was playing a little bit of these here. You also have a D here. You have to be able to learn all of your natural minor scales across the neck, and then all you got to do to figure out your harmonic minor scales, just take the 7th note of the scale. In this case, in the key of C, it would be B flat, and you just got to move them up to B. That's it. It's pretty simple. By the way, over here as well, we'd have a B flat, and then sometimes I was playing this B natural that's right below this C here. So let's go ahead and play one more time. And now I'm going to do something else, which is I'm going to actually play the harmonic minor scale as well over the C minor chord. So I actually did that one time for a second, but here's the trick, is that I'm not going to sit on that B note for a long time. I'm going to make sure I resolve that B up to C, because remember, you can hear that. It's begging to resolve up to C. So even if I'm playing a C minor chord, I can use that cool exotic sound of that harmonic minor scale, but I just have to make sure I don't really like sit on that note for too long unless I'm very comfortable with that sound in that particular context. Sometimes you can do it, but for the most part, be careful with that note. So let's hear what that sounds like. We're going to expand a little bit. See, there I played it over the C minor chord. If you want to learn how to master the guitar fretboard so that you can figure out your natural minor scales and harmonic minor scales and everything else that you need to know in order to be able to solo over any chord progression in any key, then make sure you head on over to Jamsville.com right now and pick up the Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course. Also, make sure you head on over to Jamsville merch store and pick up an awesome Jamsville t-shirt just like this one. They fit absolutely great. You also have Jamsville coffee mugs. I was just enjoying some coffee out of my Jamsville coffee mug. Make sure you check out the Jamsville merch store. Also, make sure you check out my new song. It's called My Divine. That's what you're listening to in the background right now. It is available on all streaming platforms. Check the link in the description below to stream it on your favorite platform. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a like on the video. It really, really helps support the channel, and I really appreciate the support from all of you. And until next time, listen, learn, and jam.